Hello, I'm Mario, and this is Tyrone, and he had a question about exposure sheets, timing charts, and hand-drawn animation, and I thought this would make an amazing video. So I'd like to talk about how they work. It's pretty simple, and I learned some of this. I used to do hand-drawn animation. I studied hand-drawn animation at CalArts, and I had one mentor in particular who taught me this stuff, and he learned it from Eric Goldberg. And Eric Goldberg has a very specific way of working with timing charts, so that's what I'm going to show you. It's a really interesting way to plan out a scene. Timing chart is essentially what you see here in the top corner of an of hand-drawn animation, and it's just a way to organize a shot. And so I'm using one of the shots I did as an example here. So first off, I would like to flip through the shot real quick just to show you what we have here. I had to dust this one off, dug around to find the perfect example. This flip that I could use for this little video. It's basically a character just kind of super angry, you know, waist up, pounding his fist on the table, and he's yelling, breathing, huffing and puffing, you know, he's kind of lunging forward. And so when you first start a shot like this, you want to obviously listen to the dialogue track over and over again, come up with the thumbnails, and then once you have an idea of which direction you want to go with the performance, then you do your rough pass, and then you just kind of have an approximation of where those drawings, those key poses, those key drawings are going to fall within the timeline. And so you just kind of, what I do is just kind of guess. It's like, you know what, I think this one is going to hit, frame 25, and then this one's going to be 75. These are like the main storytelling keys, and then you go and time it out, and then you get a better sense of where those keys are going to be in the timeline. And then once you get to that point, you start breaking down, like, okay, well, what's going to be in between those storytelling drawings, and those are going to be some of the main keys that you're going to have. And what you do with the main keys, main key poses in a shot like this, and the way you kind of keep them organized is by circling them. Those are the main keys right here. And then the breakdowns are usually underlined, and so that's kind of what we use to identify keys and breakdowns in an exposure sheet, a timing chart, just to kind of keep it organized, especially for people that follow you up. Because in hand-drawn animation, typically, the key animator will do the keys and the breakdowns, and then in order for someone else to follow him up, like an assistant, whatever, it's best to keep things organized for them so they know exactly where the in-betweens go. So they'll look at a chart like this, and as you can see, you have a big chart, and this basically gives, let's say, the assistant or in-betweener all the information they're going to need to know where the in-betweens go, and it's pretty simple. So let's say, like if you look at this chart right here, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that.
Can you see that? Okay, cool. So we have frame 117 all the way to 137. So those are the main keys, and everything in between. So this is this is kind of how Eric Goldberg likes to design the charts. Over the course of kind of like a longer span of frames. Usually, some animators will only put a chart in for like maybe a few frames, but apparently he likes to organize it like this so that he sort of encompasses a larger chunk of the shot, and he kind of can plan. Although he has a better idea of, I guess it makes sense to me. It just kind of allows you to plan a little bit further ahead, or I don't know. But I loved it. I used it a lot, when I was doing a lot of hand-drawn. I do CG now, but the same concepts are still kind of in the back of my mind, because it helps you understand what in-betweens are for, what breakdowns are for, and how where to put them in relation to the keys. So that's what this is about. So when you have a timing chart like this, you have the main keys circled, 117, 137, and I decided that 125 was a half. We call it half. Was kind of in between 117 and 125, but because it's not a direct, exact in between, it's still a key. You circle it still. So that drawing, 125, is still a unique drawing. It's just kind of like the halfway point, basically, between 117 and 137, kind of. That's kind of how you envision it. And so that's what these are. So the halfway point. So then you kind of break it down further. You got 117 and 125, and kind of like the general loose halfway point between those two keys will be 121, and I still circled 121 because it's still a unique drawing. It's not like a straight in between, which would be just kind of something you almost just.
Is that the same with 119? 119.
So yeah, 119 still has some unique things going on with it, which is why I still have it circled. But as you can see, 118 is an example of just a straight in between. So it's not circled, it's not underlined. So what you do in that situation is make sure that 118 falls exactly in between 117 and 119. So that's like it's just straight up in between. So however you do in between, you put the light box on, you flip, you just make sure that drawing is exactly in between the two. And then 120.
Sorry.
120 is also 123. As you can see, it's not circled, it's not underlined. So that's going to be an in between, straight in between as well. And you kind of typically leave those as for like the last thing you do. When you're animating, the most important thing is to make sure your keys and the breakdowns are in the right place in the timeline. They're timed out correctly, and then once you kind of have a really good feeling for the motion and the performance of the shot, then the in-betweens are kind of, it's sort of like the mindless step. It's like kind of like, it's kind of a little bit more relaxed because you're not really, digging around for the performance anymore. You're just literally trying to get an exact in-between of the movement there. So this is how you go about planning a chart. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions?
See the lines on the left-hand corner where you have been going like this? What does that mean? What does that mean?
So you do that. I think it's just a clarity thing, Because sometimes these things can get sort of messy. So what you do is, just for clarity's sake, is make sure that this. Sometimes it can get very confusing. Like, is this a half of these two, or when you have a long chart like this, it could possibly, you can see how it can be sort of confusing to know exactly like where the halves are. So because you put those lines here, as you can see, it just makes it clearer at first glance, which is kind of like in between, which drawing falls in between which other drawings. So so you put these little arcs around just to describe that for clarity's sake, just in case there's any sort of confusion. Because without them, I could see how it can get a little bit weird and confusing. So it's just kind of to simplify it and to make super clear what in between goes where. Because as you can imagine, when your shot goes downstream, or if you've been working on a shot for a while and you just kind of forget about this particular area of the shot, especially if it's a big shot, if it's a long shot, you can kind of like lose track of like where things were, where you initially had them designed, where you intended on putting them originally. And then when you go back to the shot, if you have a chart set up like this, it can be easier to remember. It's like, this is the structure of what I had laid out, and it's always something you can change too. You can, obviously you can erase things and just tweak some of the spacing. This is all about spacing. This is what it is. So you have like the halves and in between, and this is kind of like a slow out, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, and this is a slow in to 137. That's ultimately another reason for it, and then you kind of describe it with these charts, what that spacing is.
Also, how many seconds would that one chart be for?
This one chart?
Yeah.
Well, 24 frames a second, so, I mean, it's like 20 frames.
Hmm.
It's not even a second. You know?
All right.
I have a lot of smaller charts. They just kind of vary, you know, and I think sometimes you just have, you know, and it's kind of based on like what kind of gesture you're working with. Sometimes there's like a really specific gesture that you're trying to nail down in terms of the spacing, right? And so as a result, you know, you'll put together a chart for like that entire motion, for example. And here's another chart. You know, constantly in editing mode. You know, constantly changing the number of the keys. You know, so here's just another example of basically the spacing that I want to design for this particular chunk. Yeah, there's another one.
Would you have worked out your thumbnails beforehand for this? Before the timing chart?
No, I wouldn't go into. This is a longer one, and then you put the dialogue here up top.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so maybe this is one of the main keys, and it goes all the way to 75. So that's another, you know, 20 frames basically. And what is the spacing going to be like within those 20 frames? You can really take a good look at it and take a good estimation of like where those in-betweens are going to be. Like how do you want the movement? How do you want to design the movement going from this frame to that frame? You know, and this is where you can really start to visualize like what that's going to be like. You know, and it all kind of depends on like, you know, how you shoot and how your timing. You know, when you shoot your shot, you get kind of a general impression of where you want the keys, and this just kind of helps you solidify. This is all just the process of solidification of like, okay, well, you know, this is where the main keys are. And the timing chart helps you to kind of really define where the rest will go, and it gives you a map. It's basically a map, like a blueprint, you know.
Okay.
So, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then that's basically it, you know. See if there's just another interesting one. And then here, so here's just an example of a much smaller one. You see, it's the same idea, just smaller. Yeah, so it's just kind of based on whatever you find most useful. And a lot of animators, I notice, they'll work with just the smaller charts. Like Mark Hen, he'll just use super, you know, just like a shorter. He won't like create charts that describe like a large chunk of animation. He'll just kind of put halves. He'll just make sure that, okay, he'll put a key down, and then he'll just put like one little chart on each every other drawing, and just saying, okay, well, I want a half here and another in between there, you know, and sometimes and another note here. Oh shit. Let's see if I can get a pencil on it. I'm gonna use this. So as you can see, like these little, let's see, these little notches here describe like the spacing, you know.
Yeah.
So when they're exactly halfway in between the two notches, that means the animator is looking for, you know, an exact in between, like a perfect in between, right? But there's another thing we use if we want. Have you ever heard of thirds?
Yeah, I've thought of that.
Spacing.
Yeah.
So if you want a third, well, let me get it. What you would do and this is another reason why we have these little arcs. The best way to to make sure you get a third is to have two little arcs here. So let's say these are two keys, and if you want something that favors that last key, then you want to indicate that that in-between is not going to be a straight in-between, it's going to be a third, and that's how you describe it here in the timing chart with two little arcs here, you see?
Mm-hmm.
And so that the follow-up, the in-betweener will know that, okay, or if you're doing the in-betweens, then you'll remember that, okay, I want a third here because I want to really ease into that movement. I want to really favor that last drawing, and it gives you sometimes a snappier sort of timing to use thirds. I know James Baxter loves to use those thirds. He uses them all the time. It just kind of gives you more.
Why would you have so many time charts? Why do you have so many time charts for different? Are they for? Did you explain that for each keyframe you have a time chart for the next stage of the animation? Is that why you would have so many?
Well, there's I think as you progress through the shot, you just want to make sure that you have. There's a lot of drawings here that you need to make.
Yeah.
And the keys and the breakdowns only give you so many.
Oh yeah.
And then, so basically every few drawings is a key, let's say, and then every drawing in between there is going to be some kind of in between or semi breakdown, and you just want to kind of manage those in betweens a little. And not really worry about them, right? So you put the chart in there. It's like, okay, this is how I want to design this these 10 drawings here. This is how I want to design the spacing of those 10 drawings, and so, and then you just move on to another chunk of drawing, whatever, another section of the animation, and the whole shot requires that planning. So that's why you have so many charts. So I think if the charts get too huge, then it just becomes less practical, But I think, I kind of like these longer charts, these Eric Goldberg-esque charts, because it kind of, it kind of gives you a better way to organize. Like, let's say if you have a specific chunk that you want to sort of group together in a way, you want to kind of think about and design. You want to think about designing the spacing for that specific group, then you could do it all in one big chart. In that way, okay, this is how I want to design the spacing. That's what these timing charts really do. And then other sections call for maybe smaller charts, but I think just as an organizing, it's just a way of organizing your animation. That's really why you have charts, so many charts throughout the shot.
Right.
Just a way of keeping track of, okay, what was my intention, especially if you forget, and it's always something you can edit. Sometimes you just take a first pass at a timing chart, and that's awesome because at least you have something down that you can start with and move forward with. But yeah, really, you just need charts throughout the whole, the whole shot.
Yeah.
Which is why there are so many. There's just a lot of drawings that you have to manage. So I guess that's the simplest answer for that.
For a 3D animator, would you think of the time slider as a time chart as you're working with that?
Yeah, exactly. So you see the notches in the timeline in CG animation. And I looked at that as one just giant timing chart, and that's kind of what helped me make sense of CG animation, was just looking at those frames as a horizontal timing chart. I usually look at them vertical, off to the side of the frame.
Yeah.
But really, what I started doing is realizing that, okay, cool, that's exactly you can look at the CG timeline and look at it the same way, and that kind of helped me a lot. Just having that experience with timing charts and hand drawn, is just flipping it horizontally, and then I just understood that you set your keys in certain areas, and then once you have your keys, then you have more keys that you start sprinkling in between
Mhm.
or breakdowns, you know, and then you have an understanding of how to design what you want for your spacing too.
Yeah.
You know, what it is all about. You know, and so CG kind of gives you a little bit more control over spacing because of the graph editor. You kind of dig in
Yeah.
more specifics there as well. But like from a broad perspective, I think an understanding of these timing charts kind of can help you wrap your mind around how to work in a CG shot, CG scene,
Yeah.
just from a timing and spacing standpoint, and setting keys and where your keys are in relation to your in between breakdowns. You know, so
Something I've always like had problem with is like actually timing. It's like in a lot of tutorials I find that they always say just feel for the pose where you think it should be. How do you tackle when you're timing something? Like at the moment, I'm animating a dog and it has to jump, and I'm doing so many different tests off it, and there's some that aren't working, and it has like a jitter or something like that, and it's because the pose isn't fitting right, or maybe the time and the space and the time isn't quite right. How do you like go about that?
So I think there's two things that you have to balance when you're considering timing. And number one is believability and physics. So that'll help you get probably 80% of the way there, or maybe at least 65% of the way there. Just thinking in terms of, okay, well, what's the most believable way to represent this particular movement so that it looks possible physically? So that's kind of the way I approach it first. Okay, well, where's the believability? So I time my main keys according to what I feel like. Okay, well, what is the weight going to feel like in this particular section? And I try to achieve that feeling. You know, I try to separate it, because that'll kind of get you pretty far. You know, because a big part of animation is making sure you achieve a sense of believability in the shot. That's what if you don't have that, then you won't bring your audience into the shot. Like they'll notice that, oh, this is just animated. This is animation. It's not a real character. So that's number one, believability. So like look at physics, look at reference. Okay, how many frames does this dog need to be at its high point before, you know, inevitably it reaches its down position, you know, and if it's too long, then it's not going to feel like he's jumping. If it's too short, then it's not going to really represent the weight of a real dog. You know, okay, so that's one end of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you just kind of like envision, like, what is this? If this was a real dog, if this was like a real shot, forget it's a drawing, like, how would this be represented in time? That's basically what you're doing. You know? So you're just tweaking things in the timeline just to make sure you achieve like a good sense of weight, a good sense of timing. And then another thing that you can play around with after that, once you have like a good sense for timing, and this is something I learned from Bruce Smith, working with him on Winnie the Pooh. He's amazing at, I don't know if you know, I'm sure you know Bruce Smith. He was
I think the
supervisor on Dr. Facilier on Princess and Frog.
Yeah, I know him.
I got a chance to work with him on some stuff for Winnie the Pooh. You know, that's where I realized the power of just experimentation with timing. Because once you have, like, I would go to him with a shot that I thought was timed pretty kind of believably well, and then he would sit there and just adjust the timing, and kind of in an experimental mode. You know, he was sort of experimenting to see, okay, well, you got the timing, you got the shot, it's reading clearly, so let's make it more entertaining now. So that's what you can also do with timing. So once you got the believability part, then what you want to do is take it another step further and see if you can push the entertainment value of it. So he would just tweak some of the time, some of the, you know, position of the keys and the timeline for like a few minutes, and come up with something that had a much more interesting kind of timing. That blew my mind, because it kind of was the same shot, but at the same time it was more enhanced. It was more entertaining. So that's the power of timing. You know, just moving the keys around, trying to see, like, okay, well, if I shorten the time between these two keys and lengthen the time between those two keys, what do I get? let's see. You're just kind of open to experimenting. Like, oh, what do I get here? Is it going to create something more interesting? And that's something it's very possible with timing as well. But I think the most important thing is just to get that believability first, and then experiment after that. It doesn't hurt to experiment with your timing, because you can always just go back to what you had before. So at Disney, I'm always doing that. I'm trying to get like my first pass of timing. What is this kind of like loosely going to feel like? What is it going to look like? And then I go through constant passes where I'm sort of adjusting the timing constantly. The main keys are just, okay, well, what if I shrink this area? What is it going to feel like? What is it going to look like? It's going to be more entertaining. And you can get a sense for it just by, you have to trust yourself, your instinct.
Yeah.
It's another thing that's behind all of this is like you have an instinct for entertainment. We've all lived life. We've all watched a lot of movies and stuff like that. And we've all seen very funny things in our lives. And we all have an intuition for what's funny and entertaining. And so that's what you really have to kind of like ultimately, that's kind of in the background. It's like, okay, well, your sense of entertainment value is there in the background and dictating where the shot is going constantly. That's another thing you have to start relying on a lot. It's trusting it in a way, So like, this is what I think. This is basically what you're doing is making a statement. It's like, this is what I think is funny. This is what I think is appropriate. This is what I think is entertaining for the shot. And then you cross your fingers and hope that other people agree. If they don't, then that's an opportunity to learn. So
with the entertainment value, is that like just like going back over and exaggerating some like things that aren't physically possible? Like if it jumps, then putting a little bit of slow in and slow out there, or exaggerate the timing of that?
For the entertainment value?
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll require that, change the spacing and the timing between two frames,
Yeah.
And if that feels, because sometimes the thing about animation that's interesting is that, it needs to be believable, but at the same time, what we're doing is caricaturing reality. So sometimes we need to exaggerate certain things,
Yeah.
So sometimes we make things move really fast when they're not really that fast in real life.
Yeah.
So that's the liberty we take as artists and animators to kind of. But that's where entertainment value. That's where tweaking the timing, with that in mind, comes in. What we do. So it's constantly a process of learning and experimenting, and eventually you kind of get better and better at it, like anything.
Yeah.
So
that's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful. It's like that's understandable, and I get it now. I get what that's all about.
That's great.
It's great to see your charts and stuff.
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah, I haven't seen this shot in a long time, but I just remembered that I had a lot of charts on here, a lot of big charts, so I thought it would be a pretty good example for this one. But cool, man. So does that pretty much wrap up?
Yeah. Do you want me to stop recording?